We begin with the captain's log informing us the Enterprise is heading to the Lorenz cluster to look for the Drake, which was investigating the disappearance of all intelligent life on Minos. Riker actually knows the captain of the Drake, Rice, from their time at the Academy together, telling the story of how, for the final exam, Rice rejected the multiple-choice questions and gave his own answer, proving he's confident, smart, and has big brass balls. Why are we not watching this guy? Riker says that he's arrogant, but how that differs from everyone else in early TNG is beyond me. But between this and the discussion of how Riker himself passed over command of the Drake for the Enterprise, it shows what Robert Lewin had been trying to do with the show, something that Michael Piller would emphasize when he took over, put a greater focus on developing character. This was undermined by Maurice Hurley and Gene himself, so Lewin, whose writing career spanned shows like Gunsmoke, Mission Impossible, The Fugitive, Rawhide, and dozens more that you've probably heard of, plus The Bold and the Brave, which was nominated for an Oscar, well, that career ended with Arsenal of Freedom. He'd had enough. And you know when you're exasperated when someone who worked on the Munsters says, "That's it, this is too stupid." They're surprised that, on a planet with no people, they're suddenly being hailed. It turns out to be an automated salesman. Minos became notorious for being arms merchants.
Peace through superior firepower.
I'll admit, it'd make a good bumper sticker. Riker, Tasha, and Data head down to investigate, where they find this.
We've never seen anything like this.
It's undamaged.
I've always wanted a death ray. The Enterprise picks up an energy signature of some kind, and when Riker investigates, he comes across Rice, who seems rather calm for a man who doesn't seem to have a ship around here. What's weird is that the Enterprise reports no other life signs, meaning no Captain Rice.
Tell me about your ship, Riker. It's the Enterprise, isn't it?
No, the name of my ship is the Lollipop.
We'll appeal to our youth demographic with our Depression-era pop culture references. Then again, when I think of that Tip O'Neill thing, this was probably for the best. Rice is a very unconvincing hollow spy, and Riker dicks with him trying to get him to say something, but it's pointless. So finally he just starts yelling at Rice, until Rice disappears and is replaced by a hovering drone. The drone then puts Riker inside of a glowing bubble before Tasha shoots it, but the bubble stays, leaving Riker in some kind of stasis, presumably to be collected by someone later on. As in for interrogation, not by some fan, although I'm sure they're lining up. They can't beam Riker away, so Picard is heading down with Dr. Crusher and leaves LaForge in command.
Captain, I take great exception to your decision to beam down.
Well, you know what I object to? Being told what to do by someone dressed as a yoga instructor, so I'm going to head down. You can do some downward dog or whatever you do that masks your uselessness, while I bask in not having to listen to you for half an hour. By the time they show up, Data and Tasha explain that this was something seen in a famous civil war, projecting a hologram of someone trusted, gathering intel, and if discovered, capturing the subject for later interrogation.
We have little choice. Whatever has him is interrupting the transporter beam. Remove it.
Whoa there, Jesse James. Make sure to leave him some skin when you're done. Meanwhile, Geordi has a report.
Captain, Lieutenant LaForge here. Sensors indicate energy readings in your area.
Well, I can't imagine why you'd be reading energy while Data is blasting Riker with a phaser. But sure enough, another drone is back, and when Picard and Crusher run off, she falls down a hole, dragging him along. Luckily, we landed on something soft. Oh, sorry, I'll get off you now. Above ground, Tasha is having trouble with the drone. It keeps dodging her shots. It takes her and Data together to bring it down, which is good. The bad, communications are now scrambled. Looks like everyone's on their own. Picard and Crusher are obviously in the worst predicament, but he's already working on making a splint for her arm. Yep, Picard knows more field medicine than members of her medical staff do, as the idea baffles them in a later episode. At least Data has managed to free Riker. That means that somebody has succeeded at something around here, while up on the Enterprise, they're stuck. Something has decloaked and begun shooting at them. A problem because, as LaForge notes, you can't beam through the shields. Not even your own shields. It is once again a major plot point that you can't do that, which is why it irks me whenever they lazily do it anyway. This weapon is packing a real punch too, and the chief engineer comes up asking what the hell's going on. Why haven't they left yet? Geordi is planning to disable the attacker long enough to drop the shields and beam up the away team, but Logan has a better idea. Put me in charge. He might have a point. Their latest attempt to deal with it fails and it blasts them good again. Logan insists again. We have to leave orbit now. Geordi turns to Worf and tells him to work on analyzing its method of attack and try to anticipate it. And if there's one thing Worf knows, well, it's his name. But if there's two things Worf knows, the other is how to kill something that needs killing. Logan remains resistant to this plan, but Geordi is insistent that he stay in charge. And if Logan wants to help, he can get down to engineering and try to do his job. Otherwise, Picard will fire him too and probably put Geordi in charge. Down on the planet, another drone has shown up and found Riker, Data, and Tasha. Those things are persistent. Luckily, they've learned how to deal with it. Unluckily, it's learned how to deal with them. It's shielded now and their phasers don't work. Not until Riker joins in and collapses that shield. But after that, there's no way they're going to have the firepower to deal with it. If only there was some big-ass laser around here that they could just use to shoot it, huh? Well, no, there's no possible way that, despite constantly repairing old abandoned technology, that they could fix this old abandoned technology. That would be silly. Now, let's get back to the tech that is still working perfectly fine while no one is maintaining it at all. Down in the pit, Picard is working to keep Dr. Crusher alive, and that means finding a way to keep her awake. Not an easy task given how hard of a job it's been to keep the audience awake during Season 1. Originally, this was actually supposed to be Picard as the one who's injured and Dr. Crusher caring for him. It was the director that suggested reversing that. And it does help to give this scene a bit more drama to have the physician be injured and a layman having to do the treatment. Right now he's trying to deal with a bleeding wound on her leg without a medical kit, so she points him towards some roots. After a couple of tests, she figures that those will work as a coagulant. That or give her the mother of all hides, like Picard would know. Back on the Enterprise, Geordi's working on trying to outguess the position of the probe, and the ship gets an ass-whooping when they fail miserably at that. Logan calls up wanting to know if things are going all right with Operation Feel the Force Luke, so Geordi reluctantly summons him back up to the bridge again. The implication of the scene leading up to it is that Geordi is in over his head and is turning command over to Logan, whom we are not supposed to like because he is a horribly written character. On the other hand, it's refreshing that they're at least trying to create drama through conflict as opposed to the we'll all agree in the future approach that Gene had embraced by this time. The problem is that they're making Logan unreasonable. He's first pissing and moaning because they stayed. Now that Geordi is leaving orbit, he's pissing and moaning because they're leaving. I know this is Season 1, but could you possibly try not to suck at this? Geordi stops to explain to Logan that he has a responsibility to the 1,000 plus people on the Enterprise to protect them, which he couldn't do by staying and fighting. But he also has a responsibility to the away team, so his solution is separate the saucer section. Logan will take command of that and leave LaForge to battle the threat without the risk of civilian casualties. And more importantly, listening to Lieutenant Contrarian disagree with everything he says and does. The question now is, what does Counselor Troi think of all of this? Asked no one ever. She interrupts to talk to Geordi. He kindly asks her to piss off since he's short on time here, but she insists that the mental well-being of the crew is her primary concern, though it would often be improved if she would just stop talking to them. She tells him that the two junior officers on the battle bridge are inexperienced in combat and are going to need encouragement, and she phrases this like she's a kindergarten teacher telling a parent about a pants-wetting experience in class. Anyway, Geordi says, "Thank you, Counselor," because that's the best way to shut her up, and then separates the ship and heads back to Minos. Down in the Picard cave, he asks Dr. Crusher to tell about how she knew about the roots as a way to keep her awake. She learned it from her grandmother. Yes, indeed, this is the story that set the stage for Sub Rosa. We have this episode to thank for it. And while the episode about Beverly getting it on with a ghost got approved, the romance of this episode was crushed by Gene. He did not want any romance between these two. And after all the sex stuff he's inserted, or tried to insert into the franchise, I just find that bizarre. Things like the Ito injustice bugged me because they made sex seem so empty and meaningless, but I'm starting to think that that's the way Gene prefers his sex, empty and meaningless. Well, to show how desperate we are to cut any romance out of the episode, Picard finds a perfectly functioning piece of complex machinery down here and switches it on. showing a tracking device for the drones as well as the holographic salesman. The drone is the Echo Papa 627, in case you wanted to get one off Amazon. Maurice Hurley was involved with this story, and it serves as kind of a precursor to the Borg that he would introduce the following year. The weapon learns from each encounter and creates an improved version, as we've been seeing with the attacks on the away team. And of course, it destroyed its creators, because if you want to say tampering with dangerous things is bad, that's your go-to. That's when the away team finds them and trades info before Data hops into the hole to see if he can help. Luckily, he managed not to land on Dr. Crusher, and he's got a working tricorder, so this problem is basically licked, so let's get back up to orbit. Geordi has taken Troy's words to heart and offers words of encouragement to the two junior officers as they're preparing for battle. Picard and Data are trying to stop things before that happens, though, like changing the target.
Data, assign it a neutral target.
I hate these filthy neutrals, Kif.
Target must be specific, sir.
Itself, then. Itself or its own power source.
The force of that explosion would destroy this cavern and everyone on the surface.
Well, just pick something then. Have it declare war on a forest. Jesus, this is not hard. So instead, the drone is trying to kill Riker and Tasha, so Dr. Crusher suggests, I don't know, why not turn it off? Of course, that couldn't possibly work, because otherwise these things wouldn't have wiped out the whole planet. But this is Season 1, so naturally this plan works, via Picard asking them to stop. He's ready to buy it, so they don't need to finish the demonstration. Thus, we have all learned the important lesson of the day. When faced with an overwhelming threat, you can always fall back on capitalism to save the day. It looks like this didn't take care of the one attacking the Enterprise, though. Just a bug. We'll fix that in the next firmware update. Geordi's plan is to take the ship into the atmosphere so that if the probe follows, they can spot the turbulence even while it's cloaked and target that. The plan works, Worf gets to shoot something finally, and the day is saved, along with the away team. The end. Post-episode follow-up, annoying character goes to Logan. Again, though, it's by design. Build that straw man, build him good. Final score for Arsenal of Freedom is 4 out of 10. Compared to the rest of Season 1, it's one of the better episodes, with some good dialogue here and there, but the realization of the weapons plot is hardly inspired and is full of holes. And speaking of holes, how about the fact that the entire purpose of the trip out here, that of the USS Drake and Captain Rice's crew, is not resolved? We can, perhaps, deduce that the ship was destroyed the same way as the Enterprise. There is a tiny fragment of damaged titanium here, but that is so nebulous that the status of the ship in the Star Trek Encyclopedia varies completely on which edition of the book you're reading. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's completely destroyed. They set the stage for this Captain Rice, played up as someone who is quick-thinking and creative, and yet none of that comes into play. Did he find a way to protect his ship or his crew, shield it somehow, hide it, abandon it, and go somewhere where they couldn't be found? Or even if he failed, could he and the crew be in stasis somewhere, waiting for interrogation that will never happen? Like the conversation between Crusher and Picard hinting about their feelings, the episode just interrupts before it can get there, leaving time for Troy to play guidance counselor and Logan to bitch stupidly at Geordi. The idea of him needing to step up and be a leader is good and is handled well, yes. But overall, there's just way too much going on in this episode to cover everything adequately.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I have no knowledge of that ship.
It's just been commissioned. It's a good ship.